Dynasty creators and Dynasty managers all over the internet seem to be having a collective meltdown over the quality of the 2026 rookie class, and by extension, the value of 2026 rookie picks. In today's video, I'm going to explain why everybody needs to just calm down. My name is Paul, this is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. Let's go. All right, so if you go to basically any Dynasty channel that has posted 2026 rookie rankings or mock drafts or any other rookie content, you're gonna hear some version of the same take. You'll hear it's a bad class. You'll hear you don't want any picks outside of the top 3 or 4 or 5. You'll hear that your late first is worth more like a mid second, maybe even a late second in a different year, that you should trade your picks right now for players, or that you should pass over them in startup drafts. Don't fall into the rookie trap. But is that even true? Is 2026 actually a bad rookie class? I'll answer that in a minute, but first, let's take a big picture view here. Okay, these are all of the fantasy relevant prospects currently in the top 100 of mockdraftdatabase.com's consensus big board, which is exactly what it sounds like. It compiles dozens of big boards from all the most popular sites, NFL.com, ESPN, whatever, and it creates a consensus big board of where all of these prospects are ranked. Now, right now, we have 27 fantasy relevant players, quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends in the top 100. 9 of those players are in the first round. That's Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Love, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, Kenyon Sadiq, Ty Simpson, Denzel Boston, and KC Concepcion. Okay. We have a total of 4 quarterbacks, 15 wide receivers, 4 running backs, and 4 tight ends inside of this top 100. And just looking at the positions here, the color coding, you can see that wide receiver is clearly the strength of this class. By far the most players in that group inside the top 100. And running back is really the weak point here. I'd say that's the position that is most responsible for dragging down the perception of this class, because we have Jeremiah Love at the top. He's going to be an easy 101 pick in rookie drafts. After that, we don't really have anybody until the late second round, where you have Jadarian Price and Jonah Coleman kind of hanging out in that late second, early third round range. Neither of them is a lock to actually go inside of the top 2 rounds. Then you have Emmett Johnson, another running back prospect out of Nebraska, down in the back half of the third round. And that's it. There's nobody else currently in the consensus top 100. You do have the 2 Penn State running backs, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, hovering just outside of this range. A few more guys, in the 110s, 120s that are probably going to be 4th round picks. So that's what we're looking at right now from a big picture view. Now, there's obviously a lot more that goes into judging the quality of a class than just looking at big boards. We want to know what these players did in college and how they stack up to their peers athletically. That's what rookie models are for, right? Like JJ Zacharysen's prospect guide or Dynasty Domain's bakery scores. Those resources can help us understand who to target and who to avoid in our drafts. However, it should not be understated just how strong of a signal draft capital is all by itself. The correlation between draft capital and fantasy success is exponentially higher than any other individual metric, which makes intuitive sense for 2 reasons. One, the NFL has hundreds of scouts working year-round to identify the best college football players to draft. I don't think they're infallible, obviously. We have tons of draft busts we can look back on to prove that's not true. But with all of the resources that the NFL has, they should be, and generally are, pretty good at drafting. And then draft capital is also kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When a player gets drafted high, the team wants or even needs that player to succeed. And so that player gets more opportunity. They get a longer leash for making mistakes. More attention is placed into turning that player into whatever the team's vision is and making them a focal point. So draft capital is really important. Even the best prospect models, the most finely tuned for identifying fantasy football stars, are not outperforming the predictive power of raw draft capital nearly as much as you might think. I'm not saying the data doesn't matter or that we should just be blindly drafting rookies in the exact order that the NFL does. Understanding prospect profiles, especially age-adjusted production in college, can help us to understand that George Pickens is a much better bet than Tyquan Thornton, even though Tyquan Thornton went 2 picks ahead of him in the NFL draft. But draft capital is still the most important piece of the puzzle by far. So before we totally bury the 2026 class, let's just see how this year stacks up against 2025 in terms of projected draft capital. Now for this comparison, I'm going to be looking at Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 big board. And the reason I'm doing this, I wanted to compare the consensus big boards from Mock Draft Database, but there wasn't any way to view specifically January or early February of last year. So instead, we're using Daniel Jeremiah's because he's one of the more prominent and respected NFL draft analysts. And it gives us some consistency for comparison because both of these lists were published at basically the exact same time 1 year apart, both in the last week of January of the respective year. So we're getting some consistency, as far as Daniel Jeremiah's process and the time period that these lists were created. And looking at these early top 50s reveals some pretty interesting insights. First of all, you can see just by looking at the list, there's the exact same number of fantasy relevant players. There are 16 fantasy relevant players inside of Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 for both of these years. Now, 2025 does have a slight edge in terms of projected round one talents, where 2025 has 11 players in that top 32 range. 2026 only has 8. And 2025 does have a distinct edge at the running back position, where 2025 has 4 running backs inside the top 40. You had Amari Hampton as a projected late first-round pick. That ends up coming to fruition. Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson projected as early second-round picks, and that's almost exactly where they actually went in the draft. So pretty good calls there. You look at the 2026 big board, there's only one other running back after Jeremiah Love, and it's Jadarian Price, interestingly enough, his college teammate, who is outside of Daniel Jeremiah's top 40. So that's definitely going to change the composition of rookie drafts, assuming nothing changes dramatically. Because in 2025, you had those really nice values in the middle of the first round with Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. And I would say if there's one spot where this class seems very clearly inferior to last year, it would be in that 106 to 109 range, where there were some really quality prospects. You think about Henderson and Judkins and Loveland and Warren. Those guys don't necessarily exist in this 2026 class. But another thing that's interesting to note about this 2025 list is how much things did change in the months between the original top 50 here being published and the actual NFL draft. You can see Shedeur Sanders as the 11th overall prospect. He ends up falling to day 3 of the draft. There is no Tyler Shuck here. Obviously, he ends up being a top 40 pick. There's no Terrence Ferguson on this list. There's no Jaden Higgins on this list. We also have Jackson Dart here as a second rounder. He ends up being a first rounder. This is going to happen in 2026 as well. There are going to be changes from this point forward. So whatever the class looks like right now, understand that's not the complete picture. There are going to be risers. There are going to be fallers. One key player to watch is Trinidad Chambliss, the Ole Miss quarterback. He's currently suing the NCAA for an additional year of eligibility, basically, and I have no idea how that's going to go. I know they rejected his initial request or whatever. If he's forced to enter the NFL draft, he's probably going to be an early second round pick in the NFL draft, possibly a late first, and he's a mobile quarterback prospect, so he's a very interesting guy to keep an eye on. You also have the 2 Indiana wide receivers, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper. Neither of them appear on this list. Both of those guys are risers in perception lately, especially Omar Cooper. And I think either one of them could be like a Jaden Higgins type going in the early second round, maybe even possible one of them sneaks into the first. And there's also just one tight end here. There are a couple guys like Max Clare from Ohio State or Eli Stowers, who is kind of an analytics darling. Either of those players could potentially crack the top 50, be a late riser like a Terrence Ferguson. Now, don't get me wrong, there can be fallers too. I know I'm mostly just describing ways that the class can get better. You can also see guys fall. Like I think Daniel Jeremiah is a little bit overly optimistic about guys like Antonio Williams or Deion Burks, but we just don't know. Like sometimes these players come out of nowhere. I remember Jaden Reed was kind of an out of nowhere second round pick, and he ended up being a nice hit as a rookie. So we don't have the complete picture. I want to be super clear though. My point is not to suggest that 2026 is equal in quality to 2025 just because these two lists are the same length and look similar. It's not. Okay, 2026, I do believe, is a lower quality class than 2025 and just lower than the average draft class, lower than what you would expect. But the sentiment online, which I have seen play out in startups and trades and mock drafts, is that this class is like irredeemably bad. that late first round picks and second round picks are virtually worthless relative to other years. And honestly, after digging into it and really thinking about how I want to approach this rookie cycle, I just do not agree with that conclusion. Because Dynasty is a game of value, and value is always relative. If you're buying a car or you're buying a house, the only way to know whether you're getting a good price is to know what other cars and other houses are being sold for. Otherwise, the definition of good is completely arbitrary. So when it comes to the 2026 class, yes, I agree. It's weaker than an average class. In most draft slots, though I'd argue not all of them, you're probably getting a worse prospect than last year or most other years. The problem is that this information isn't helpful because it's completely priced in. And I would argue it's overly priced in. All of the negative sentiment that's swirling around about this class has led to a huge overcorrection where the average Dynasty manager doesn't want to touch these picks with a 10-foot pole. Okay, I finished a Dynasty startup a few weeks ago, and I could not believe how late some of these picks went. Just for some quick reference points, the rookie 105 pick went after Jared Goff, T. Higgins, and CJ Stroud. The rookie 201 pick went after Cortland Sutton, Chris Godwin, and Trey Harris. And the 206 didn't come off the board until the end of the 13th round after Elijah Arroyo, Kenneth Gainwell, Quinn Ewers, Isaiah Likely, and Rico Dowdle. So in this market, which is so aggressively negative about the 2026 class, I simply don't care about the quality of these prospects because the opportunity cost has been reduced so dramatically. It's not wrong to point out that there are some weaker or even downright bad prospects that are projected to go fairly high in this class. Somebody like Jeremy Bernard from Alabama might fit that bill. But do you know who else was a terrible analytical prospect? Matthew Golden. Okay, his production metrics as a college wide receiver weren't even mediocre. They were literally awful. Just to give one example, his career 1.67 yards per out run is lower than every single wide receiver prospect in the current consensus top 100. He had some good games to end his college career. He tested well at the combine. He got drafted in the first round to a good situation. But at no point in time was he a good prospect, at least not by any way that I would measure a prospect. I know JJ Zacharyson was lower on him as well. And yet, many people spent the offseason arguing that he was a future superstar or even the wide receiver one of the class because he was a good route runner and because he was going to be Jordan Love's wide receiver one. And if you don't like that example, we can look at Keon Coleman, another poor college prospect who was littered with red flags, and yet he became a coveted pick in the late first and early second round of 2024 rookie drafts because he was an early second round pick to the Buffalo Bills. And it was as simple as that. So I think buying or at least holding 2026 picks right now is a smart move purely because of human psychology. Okay, the truth is that these picks are still going to gain value as the draft approaches, just like we see every single year. Rookie hype is inevitable. Okay, prospects that no one really cares about right now are going to start to get more attention. Again, this is already happening with Omar Cooper, and we see this cycle every single season. Eventually, in most leagues, for most managers, the desire to get that dopamine hit of drafting a player will start to outweigh objective analysis at some point. Just consider the forces that drive up rookie pick values. First of all, it just takes one truther to make your pick of a lesser prospect more valuable. If one person in your league likes Denzel Boston, it does not matter how the other 10 managers feel. Just trade that guy the pick. If you don't want to pick him, you just need one person that likes that player more than you, and you now have a trade partner. And regardless of what the content creators are talking about right now, regardless of how negative they're being right now, they will find ways to spin these rookies in a more positive light in April, May, and June because it sells. It gets a lot of views. People love to hear about breakouts and sleepers and diamonds in the rough and why player X is absolutely guaranteed to be a hit and no one else is talking about this guy. That's just how it works. That is how the content cycle works. So if you don't want to draft a single rookie this year, that's fine. But now is not the time to be panicking or trying to sell off all of your picks. I think even if you hate this class, even if you think it's the worst draft class in the history of draft classes, you should be buying 2026 rookie picks right now. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for supporting the channel. I am going to be making a video maybe next week on which players that I would actually trade for picks right now. So subscribe to the channel if you want to catch that. If you need even more Dynasty content from me, you can go ahead and become a YouTube member. There's a link in the description, or you can hit the plus on the subscribe button. That's gonna get you access to weekly live streams, private channels in the Pure Potential Discord, as well as my top 200 Dynasty rankings that are being updated periodically throughout the offseason. Either way, guys, I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video. Go send out some offers for 2026 rookie picks, and hopefully I'll see you soon.